If you watch the 1932 Betty Boop short film Minnie the Moocher, you might recognise the opening bars. Does that sound familiar? It's a bit like the opening to the Boogeyman song in The Nightmare Before Christmas. Beginning with that, it's not hard to find other similarities, like the call and response. Even the character design is similar. Both the ghost walrus and Oogie Boogie are bipedal, with bulbous bellies and arms that taper off into points. And they both have some pretty slick moves. Then there's the setting. The ghost tree cave, which is full of skeletons and 1930s vice, is a bit like Oogie's treehouse dungeon. In his autobiography Burton on Burton, The Nightmare Before Christmas writer and producer Tim Burton confirms that it was Cab Calloway in the Betty Boop cartoons who inspired the Boogeyman character. As well as being one of the songwriters for Minnie the Moocher, Cab Calloway is the voice of the ghost, and also the man behind his dance moves. In the autobiography, Burton talks about using visual symbols to convey a feeling rather than to reference established characters. For example, here's what he writes about Sally. I was into that whole psychological thing of being pieced together. Again, these are all symbols for the way that you feel. The feeling of not being together and of being loosely stitched together and constantly trying to pull yourself together, so to speak, is just a strong feeling to me. So those kind of visual symbols have less to do with being based on Frankenstein than with the feeling of pulling yourself together. But Burton does confirm that Calloway's ghost was a source of inspiration. The Cab Calloway thing was a more specific reference. However, when Danny, that's Danny Elfman, the film's composer and songwriter, and I were talking about it, it had more to do with this feeling of remembering. Because I remember seeing these Betty Boop cartoons where this weird character would come out. I didn't know who it was, but it would do this weird musical number in the middle of nowhere, and it was like, what the hell is that? There's also an insert that more explicitly confirms the connection between Calloway's ghost and Oogie Boogie. While Burton and Elfman had no specific style in mind for the film's musical numbers, preferring to see where the story took them, the one sung by Oogie Boogie Man was patterned after a character found in Max Fleisch's Betty Boop cartoons, which was voiced by Cab Calloway. If you want more examples of how Cab Calloway and the Fleischer Studios shaped the character, have a look at this clip from the 1933 Fleischer Studios cartoon, The Old Man of the Mountain, also starring Cab Calloway.
What you gonna do now?
Gonna do the best I can.
And now, with your permission, I'm going to do my stuff.
What are you going to do?
I'm going to do the best I can.
Max and Dave Fleischer and Cab Calloway have many legacies. Among other achievements, Max Fleischer invented rotoscoping, which is an animation technique in which artists trace over frames from footage of real people in order to replicate their movements. That's how the ghost walrus dances so realistically. In 1931, Calloway's Minnie the Moocher charted at #1 in the US and sold over 1 million copies, which was a record for an African American recording artist at the time, decades before the US civil rights movement. It has been covered or reimagined extensively throughout the decades that have passed since its release. I'm not sure if the animators and the singer ever dreamt, back in 1932, that their work would still be considered iconic at the time this video was made, nearly 100 years later. But I'm sure they never imagined that in turning Cab Calloway into a ghost walrus, they'd be sowing the foundations of a 90s Disney villain who would, this far into the new millennium, still be terrifying kids and some adults everywhere.